Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Imperfect Marketing. I'm your host, Kendra Corman, and today I'm joined by Deirdre. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I am really excited to be having this great conversation with you about content repurposing, especially when it comes to leveraging your podcast, because it saves so much time for me. And I know that you have tools that do this, right?
Yes.
And you make this happen. So talk to me a little bit about how you got into this.
Yes. Thanks so much for having me on here, Kendra. It's an absolute honor to be here. So, the short version is that a few years ago, I'm losing track of it, 3 to 4 years ago, I was in a coaching business. I was actually coaching e-commerce business owners how to grow through digital marketing. And I had a podcast for that business specifically. And I always struggled with how to actually bridge the gap between this content that was really great content that I'm creating via the podcast and getting more people to listen to it, because that was, the way for people to enter my world, if you call it that, and, learn more about me and what it is that I can do, but also use it in other ways and in other mediums that could actually, smartly, hopefully. And I haven't, I don't know if we're showing video here, but I have a hoodie on that says intelligently lazy. The sloth is like our spirit animal because that was like what we're all about, right? It's like, how can I be intelligently lazy about this stuff that I'm doing? Because, at the time, and I think everyone was doing this, so I don't think I was alone, but, I had a podcast, I'd set it live, and then I'd do one of those social media posts that was like, episode just dropped, go listen to it. And maybe we'd have an audiogram, one of those things with the sound wave things. Yeah, it was like all the rage back then. No one cared. No one cared about that post. It got no engagement, and it seemed like no one really cared about the podcast. So I was like grappling with, okay, well, I have to grow my business, but I also want to be growing this podcast. How can I actually use one for the other? And so that kind of led me down the path of going, okay, well, how can I use this really rich content to create other things? So it started with obviously the show notes, because show notes are pain in the behind to be creating, and then the social media posts, and then it went into more longer form content like blog posts. And when I got into LinkedIn, it was like LinkedIn articles and a whole host of different things. And so that's how Capsho came to be. So Capsho launched in July of 2022, which, believe it or not, was pre ChatGPT. It was like pre the AI hype, and it was powered by AI. Essentially, what you would do is just upload your audio or video file, and literally in minutes, it would create, rattle it off, like show notes, YouTube description, social media posts, LinkedIn articles, blog posts. Now it does it clips videos and and you can also generate images off the back of it as well. So a ton of things that it can do, all in the name of being intelligently lazy, of going, hey, how can I use content that I'm already creating to actually amplify my message and my voice?
So I am a fan of Capsho. I actually used it. I'm trying to remember. I used it for quite a while back in 2023. I know for sure. And it streamlined the process. Like creating the show notes, creating the blog post, and then the tweet for X, the Facebook post, and the LinkedIn post and everything. It was all just so much work. I mean, even when AI came out, it's still a lot of work.
It's still a lot of work.
You have to do 800 different prompts. But with Capsho, you don't have to do any of that. And I think that it really streamlines the process for people that are looking to do that. So very cool. I love the tool. I think that there's just so much value in that, in the tool, and how it works and the type of content that it can give you.
Yeah,
so,
thank you.
Let's talk about content repurposing, and what are your thoughts on that? Because I know, so I'm a marketing consultant, and so when I talk to a lot of my clients, I'm like, okay, so you want to do one podcast episode, and then you're going to leverage it, and they're like, but I'm talking about the same thing, like in all these different platforms, and for more, like, a lot of times I'm making them talk about it for at least a week, different angles of it, but still the same overarching topic that their podcast episode covered. They're always so concerned that they're not talking about enough different stuff. Now, I know what I think about that, but what are your thoughts on that and how they work that in?
Yeah, I have a few different thoughts on that, and I've struggled through this because I was 100% in that boat as well, where I was like, I feel like I'm repeating myself over and over again. But you realize a few things when you do that. One is that people do not care about you. As in, what I mean by that is that you are not the center of their lives, right? So
I
it's not
say
like
that
they're
all the
following
time.
you. Yeah, they're not following you on like every platform every day, just waiting for your new post or your new, whatever to come out. Like they're just not. And so they're always going to miss. Like I have some of, people who I engage with all the time. And even they will be like, oh, I totally missed that email or I totally missed that post. And so you realize that actually you're not the center of anyone's universe. And so they're not going to actually know that you've talked about something in a similar vein or a similar theme multiple times. But the other thing too is that you want to be known for what it is that you're an expert in. And that comes down to repetition and consistency, actually. So the more that you can actually talk about the same things over and over again, the better. You actually get people then come to know you as, oh, you're that person. And so even if they're talking to someone else and say, you always talk about, I don't know, what's an example? Like,
We could
I
use my friend
always,
Brenda Meller. I use her as an example for this all the time. She is the queen of LinkedIn, in my opinion, but she talks
right,
about LinkedIn all day, every
all
day.
the time. And you kind of go, okay, well, how much can I keep talking about LinkedIn? But you go like, she becomes a LinkedIn person, right? It's like,
Mhm.
and when I talk to someone else and I'm like, and they're like, oh man, I'm really struggling with my LinkedIn. I'm like, I know a LinkedIn person and it's Brenda Miller, So I
Mhm.
think that there's actually so much power in repeating ourselves over and over again.
Okay. So I want to pull out a couple of things. One, you're not that important to other people. Okay. So nobody remembers what you post. Heck, some days I couldn't actually tell you what I posted yesterday. Like, I can't tell you what I posted, let alone what someone else did. So don't worry about
100%.
that. And then repetition is important. We call it frequency in the world of marketing. Like we wanted to hit a certain number back when I was the chief advertising manager. When they came with the media plan, they told us about the frequency that they were going to hit people and how often our target was going to actually see our communications. And that was important because we wanted it to be a big number. The
Yes.
bigger, the better. Well, for the most part, within reason. Okay. Cause there's those commercials that you're just like, I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as long as we didn't hit that number, we were fine. And it took a long time to get there. I think that the number I heard is something like someone needs to see something a minimum of 13 times
Man,
nowadays.
the number keeps going
It
up. It
keeps
started like
going up.
7, and then it's like I hear something ridiculous, like sometimes like 42 times or something, and I'm like, I'm also not surprised because we all have the attention span of an ant these days. So,
Right. Well, it's like we have short attention spans. Plus, again, we're inundated with so much content that it's
mm-hmm.
just crazy.
Yes.
So, all right. So, Capsho launched before the AI craze, and I am an AI crazy lady. So, I do love AI.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me a little bit about the system and how it works. Like how does the system create the show notes, the YouTube description, and all the different pieces, social posts and blog posts and things like that?
Yeah. So I don't know if you would have tried the new version of Capsho, which we actually launched this year. Literally almost every year we've been upgrading, almost like the smarts behind the engine. But basically Capsho as it stands now is it in terms of how the process is you upload your audio or video file. And then basically what the power of what Capsho does now is that it knows your we call it persona, but like you, right? Like your brand, your tone of voice, like who your audience is, and it will actually create the content based on that. And the cool thing is that once you go in and edit any of those assets and you mark as complete, it actually self-learns. So the platform itself actually knows like, oh, you really like to start your blog post with hey y'all, for example. I don't know, like, that might be the consistent thing that you do, and it will actually start to just draft blog posts with that in mind. Or it might be like you really like bullet points in this part of your show notes, for example. So it will start to draft it in that way. So it's very custom. It's smart in that way. We really wanted to build it so it was like intelligent. So basically, yeah, it just ingests like what you give it, and then it creates these assets for you. You go ahead and edit them, and then yeah, you publish. It's kind of as simple as it sounds.
Yeah, it's a really easy system to navigate. I have not used the new version, so I will be using it for this episode for sure. So check out the show notes
Yeah.
and the social posts around this episode so that you can see what that output looks like. Of course, I'm a big fan of editing all generated output. So there might be
Yeah.
some edits in there, but again, human supervision is still important in a lot of this to make sure that it is reflecting exactly what you want it to. So, all right. So, what do you tell aspiring podcasters or people that are looking to consider starting a podcast or that just think it's a ton of time and effort or too much time and effort, I should say, rather than a lot?
I mean, it depends. It can be. And I think, even to the point of like what this podcast is all about, which is imperfect marketing, everything's about starting imperfectly. And I truly, truly do believe that. So I have a really great friend, Stacey Lauren, and she talks all about like, just go live. She's like, if you're going to start a podcast, just go live, just do it live. And the really great thing about that, I mean, some people might be like, live, like that, they break out in rash. But, the great thing about live is that you actually don't have to worry about editing or like it is what it is, like, so if you put something out there that's completely imperfect, that's okay. That's what it's all about. And the great thing is if you're just starting, it's like no one's listening anyway, so it really doesn't matter. And then you just use AI to actually like put whatever you spoke about actually makes it coherent. That's a great thing about AI. And so I would just say like starting perfectly, don't get caught up in the editing process and the post production, like all of that. Just literally turn on your mic or just record into your phone if you want to. It's more the process of, I find, like talking your thoughts out, because regardless of where we are in our business, it's going to help us come to clarity in something. Like when I first started my business, just having a podcast helped me actually start to clarify my frameworks, like what it was that like my actual message, even my audience, like it actually helped me get to that point, because sometimes we get so in our heads about all of this that we just go round and round in circles, and we just need to like have an outlet to let it out. And a podcast is just such a powerful way to do that, and also build an audience that comes along the journey with you. So that's a really, really long answer to your question, but it's literally like, if you're worried about the time and effort that goes into podcasts, like don't just do it completely imperfectly. No one's listening anyway. And think of it just almost as your own journal, in a way of like just talking your own thoughts out, or, talking to really great guests and, leveraging their thoughts to sort of like come up with something that you can, maybe borrow, maybe, enhance upon, or maybe even like be able to share and use as connections with other people to be like, oh, I had this really great conversation with Kendra and she's all about this. And, you should really connect with her, because I think you guys, even that, there's so much power in that network effect.
There is. So I just recorded an episode because, again, I batch record in advance for January, one of my solo show episodes. And it was all about leveraging your podcast for networking. And I talked about a little bit about how I need to do it a lot better than what I do. But it's true. There's so many nuggets in what you just said, though, that I do want to reiterate and point out. Just start. Because nobody's listening. I do actually feel bad when people go back and listen to old episodes of mine, because I'm always like, yeah, start at like episode 100, because that's when I really got like a flow for things.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it was every year I try to do some different improvements on the show and how I do it. Because in the beginning, it's like I covered everything marketing, and it's like I didn't know what I was talking about tomorrow, and nobody else did either. They just knew it was about something about marketing, and now I've focused in, again, narrowing my offering and what I talk about. So it's more podcasts, email marketing, and leveraging AI for productivity, because we all wear so many hats that we really need help to do that along the way. And I love how Capsho does that for podcasting. It actually works with all three, right? Because it'll draft an email that announces the show, but it pulls out those nuggets. Sometimes we're too close to always see exactly, wait,
Yeah.
I just talked about something for 30 minutes. What was I saying? And so leveraging that content, I think, there's just so much there to it. Now, you said that Capsho is doing clips now too?
Yes. Yeah.
So
If you
okay.
upload video, then it'll actually clip, depending on how long your episode is, it'll clip anywhere from 3 to 10 clips.
That's very cool because yes, you mentioned the audiograms towards the beginning of the episode, and that was the
Yeah.
cool thing back then. And they are still cool. So if you're not recording video again, start, even if you don't
Hmm.
want to do your hair and smile pretty for the camera, it's okay. I think I started doing episode 100 or 101 started video for me. So I
Hmm.
get it. You don't have to start with video immediately. But yeah, the clips are just, they become so interesting, right? And it just really
Yeah.
shows in a digestible format for those people that aren't podcast listeners, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what have you been seeing then, talking about like the evolution of the podcast sharing piece? What have you been noticing in the world of podcasting? Because I know a lot of people are like, I had a meeting with a client in their PR agency and they're like, everybody has a podcast. And I'm like, no, everybody does not have a podcast. So many people failed at their podcast because they didn't have a plan and they didn't know
So
how they were
many.
going to
Yeah.
repurpose it. And so most of those podcasts are done. And then I think Alex Sanfilippo had posted some information back in November of 2024. He was reading some industry reports about couple thousand podcasters ended their podcasts in 2024, and they were consistent podcasters, and some of them created new shows, some of them retired from podcasting. But I feel like podcasting is one of the least crowded mediums out there. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing with all the podcasters that you're working with?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's something that, and I'm really good friends with Alex and we talk about this all the time, which is like, how do we help more podcasters actually just keep going? It's one of those, like, we know why podcasters stop, but it's just like, why? Why? Like, it doesn't have to be that hard. And I think there's something about the medium. You're right. Like, it is probably one of the least crowded spaces, but there's something about the medium, about putting an this audio thing out where there's like an expectation, and I don't know, but it might come from like our expectations with radio, where it's like things are produced and quality is really, audio quality is really good, and there are like set segments, and it's a very produced show usually. And so when we then transition into podcast, we just automatically go, well, it's audio as well, so it has to be at that level, it has to meet that bar. And it's a really weird thing what we all go into. And the other thing too is that we immediately think, for whatever reason, that it's like, well, I published my podcast, maybe it's my first or second or third episode, and either there was usually one or two things happens. Either you get pretty much no listeners for like, or maybe like a handful, like it's your mum and your
I was
your
going to say,
husband who are,
mom's listening. Okay.
yeah, exactly. Right. Like that's, and then even after a while, she gets bored of it. So you see the numbers drop. Like, so either you get no one consistently listening, and then you look at, the end of like at the 10th episode and you're like, oh, why am I still doing this? It feels like there's no one on the other end listening to it. Or maybe you get this really great spike, which is awesome because maybe you did a really good job to like promote it and all the things, but then it drops again and you're like why should I keep doing this if no one cares and no one's listening? And I think the key is, for anyone going into podcasting, especially actually any kind of content creation, I would say, is that we always, because this is like what the gurus tell us, and it's always like, yeah, know your audience and know what what it is that they want to listen to. And that is totally true. But I always come from like, actually, you've got to enjoy the process for yourself first, which is why I go back to, the medium of podcasting is really just, you're just talking to a mic. But if you just use that as an excuse to even just get clarity on your own journey, your own business, your, whatever it is that you're working on, then there's actually things that you're getting out of it first and foremost through the process, rather than necessarily caring about what the numbers are saying at the end of the day. I really do think that flipping that is an important mindset switch just for us to get started and keep going with it, because the more that we do keep going with it, and anyone who's been in podcasting consistently will tell you that if you're consistent, your numbers will grow. People will find you. But the problem is that so many of us stop before that point. And so that's why you kind of have to enjoy the process for yourself first. And then it's like, then the listeners and the audience will find you.
Yeah, I reference my first failed podcast often. on this show. And it's because I didn't have a plan. I didn't enjoy the process. My gosh, it was horrible. I'm like, oh, I got to come up with another episode. I really didn't like what I was doing because I wasn't talking to like cool people like you. And it was just me droning on for a half an hour. And it was like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I didn't. And I think I hit the average. I think I hit episode 7 or 8. And I was like, okay, peace out. We're done.
That's a perfect. Yeah.
And now I'm at episode 250 something. And yeah, I mean, you got to do it. You got to be consistent and the numbers come with it.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
people are surprised by that and that it takes a while to build that audience, but it is such a great investment if you have a message to send. So let me ask you one more question. This show is called Imperfect Marketing because marketing is anything but a perfect science. So having been a consultant and then building your own software, what has been your biggest marketing lesson learned?
I have so many. Like, I'm like, where do
Nobody
I even
ever
start?
has a shortage of these.
Seriously. Okay. I guess the first one, like, it's kind of back to what you even said in the question. Like, there's actually no silver bullet to marketing. I think so many people get really down on themselves or their business because they're like, well, I did the thing that so and so was telling me to do and it hasn't been working. And, every strategy actually works. But it kind of comes down back to like what I was saying, even with podcasting. It's like, you've got to kind of stick with it for a good amount of time to actually yield the results and the dividends from it. But again, so many of us, and I'm guilty of this as well, like so guilty, we just stop before we, and we move on to the next thing because we get like shiny object syndrome about some other brand new strategy. And so I always, I was actually, again, speaking to like Alex and some other really cool people in the podcasting space yesterday actually about this. And like my advice is whatever you naturally lean to. So if you love talking and you love, interviewing people and meeting people, like a podcast is just a no-brainer medium. Just double down on that. If you love to write, like emailing is a no-brainer medium. Just double down on that. There is no silver bullet to podcast growth. There's no silver bullet to even growth of your business. It's just like find what it is that you can commit time and resources and effort to and just keep doing that day in and day out. And you will get the results that come with that.
I love that. I love that. Love that so much. Yes, because there isn't a silver bullet. If anybody tells you you have to do something, just say, I'm sorry, why do I have to do?
Yeah.
Because nobody has to do anything, right? In the world of marketing. I've interviewed people on this show who have gone off social media entirely. They replaced it with guesting on podcasts and email newsletters. And so they replaced it with other things that they liked better.
Yes.
There's so many options out there for us to go down. And there's no one size fits all. And just because one person has success with one thing doesn't mean that you're going to have success with it because you're going to do it differently. Right.
Yes.
And be a part of
100%.
it. So I love that. I love this conversation. This has been fantastic. Capsho is one of the first tools that I used when I was starting to feel a little bit of pod fade and my podcast was starting to feel like work.
Oh, I'm so glad.
So it was an amazing that and Podmatch, which is what Alex Sanfilippo started. And I'll put links to both of those in the show notes for you guys so you can connect with him and check out Podmatch too. But I think that there's so much power in podcasting and the tools that you're offering that are going to help people streamline the process a ton. So be sure to check it out. Be sure to learn more. And if you're interested in starting a podcast, definitely look into it and then come up with a little bit of a plan and a strategy and then just start doing it because it's not as hard as we make it out to be. And again, you're not that important to people. So go ahead.
That's really
Don't
the key.
worry about the ums and the ahs because even if they are listening, even if they go back to one of those embarrassing episodes that you're like, oh, did I really do that? It's okay, right? They're going to forget about it eventually. So you're all good. You're all good. So yes, move forward, embrace it. There's no silver bullet. So just get started and get going. So where can people find you online? What's the best place to go?
Yeah, so Facebook is probably the platform that I'm most on, and I'm just Deirdre Tshien, my full name on there. You can find me. I'd love to connect. Otherwise, you can check out Capsho at capsho.com. That's capsho.com. And if you find a way to reach out to me, you can email me at hi@capsho.com as well. Then, I've got some discount codes and stuff. Kendra, maybe I can share something with you as well to give to your
Perfect.
listeners. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for spending your time with me today. For those of you listening or watching, if you learned something today, and I hope that you did, I'd love it if you would rate and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. It really helps me out. Until next time, have a great rest of your day.